Hello and welcome back, everybody, to a brand new episode of r/ProRevenge. My name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do, however, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as make sure you got notifications turned on. That way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. Before we get started, I just wanted to throw in a little side note, letting you guys know that today's video is going to be one long story in particular, so buckle up and get ready. Our first story of the evening comes to us from Destruction Escapist 13 days ago, and it's called, "My Employer Stole My Stuff, so I Made Him Pay for It." Some background first. Since I was a kid, I was fascinated in computers and electronics. During school, I had no social life. I just stayed home and was learning things. I was going to a generic high school that should prepare you for a university without any specialization. But there were a few people with the same interests as me, and our IT teacher was really supportive of us. When I finished high school, I already had a job as a programmer and had a few years of experience in the field. I was also experienced with electronics and even worked on a few contracts for the factory in town, involving creating machines for them. Other engineers came up with ideas on how the machine will work. My job was to put the motors, sensors, and wire it up and program it for the PLC to control it. I moved to a big city and started university, so I lost my programming job in my city. I was looking for a part-time job while living off of my parents' support. Things changed when my friends got an escape game voucher for 5 people for his birthday and took me with him. The escape game had cool magic stuff, like you'd place objects in a shelf and all the pictures in the room would fall off the walls. While we were there to solve puzzles, I was mostly interested in these magic things, making theories about how they made them and thinking how I would do it. When the game was over, I saw for a moment their technical room, and at this point, I was like, I want to work here. I sent them my CV, and as I was overqualified for the job, I was accepted after the first interview. I was young, naive, and stupid, so they used me. My hourly rate was after tax as equivalent of $8.50. To put it in comparison, cashiers at a big store here make roughly $6.50 plus benefits. The first few months here were awesome. I was paid for doing my hobby, and the owner loved me, as his previous tech guy, referred to now as Tech Moron, was, compared to me, just dumb. I'm not bragging, I swear. He didn't come up with any original designs. He would just find something on the internet and was skilled enough to read the schematics and somewhat copy it. But he had big gaps in his knowledge. Once he told me that I can't build a battery-operated circuit that will be powered while the battery is charging, as this would cause the battery to explode. When I told him about the charging regulators and how it's not an issue with his phone or laptop, he just told me I was hired to help him and to F off. Over time, Tech Moron started to realize that I'm just smarter than him, and his ego couldn't handle it. So he decided, from now on, he was gonna make my life a living hell. For example, the owner tasked me with replicating devices that they already had in one game, as he wanted to put it in another. I spent weeks just messaging Tech Moron, asking him for schematics and a source code, calling him, and he never replied. Then I decided, F him, and I came up with an improved design and built it. When I was showing it at the next meeting to the owner, who was very happy with it, Tech Moron just yelled at me for not using his design and wasting time on reinventing the wheel. After some time, the owner realized what was going on and hired another tech guy, Tech Senior from now on. But he cannot fire Tech Moron, as he had all the important source codes and designs at his laptop, and because of bad contract, it wasn't property of the escape game company. Little did we know that in the future, he will not hand over most of the designs and codes, and we will end up rewriting that from scratch. The company was also franchising. We took a game we already had running, made an exact copy, and installed it at another location. We then provided support while they were paying us license fees, usually a smaller percentage of their profits. The owner was a typical manager who thought 9 women can deliver a baby in a month, and it showed as the company grew. Eventually, Tech Senior was made my boss as he had much more experience in electronics, while I was more oriented in programming and on-site support for game masters if something broke. We didn't care about Tech Moron at this point. He just showed up once a month, did almost no work, criticized all we already did, and go home. Things were going really well, so we hired a few electronics students to help us. The building department, which was making props, like special wooden tables that we could hide our magic into, also grew. Things were looking really good, until one meeting about a new franchise client. The owner told us what he needs. We tech guys talked to prop guys, went over all the requirements, and told him we needed 10 weeks for it. Well, 8, but we always accounted for crap going sideways, as this date will be on contract. Usual stuff is in healthy company. Next week, next meeting. He told us that the client does not want to wait, and he puts a 5-week into the contract. His reasoning was we're doing the same stuff as before, and we now have more people, so it'll go faster. We worked hard. Like, really hard. There were weeks when I just went home for 8 hours to take a shower and sleep for a bit, then went back to the workshop to work on stuff. It was hard, but we managed to finish in time, and I got some sweet money in overtime. This, however, was a mistake. Now we showed him that what he wants is possible. So the next contract went over the exact same deadline. More overtime. I remember having almost no social life, just working the whole week, sometimes sleeping at the workshop, and being super stressed out. Then, every Friday, I went to a pub with a few friends, totally wasted myself to relieve the stress, and slept through the whole weekend. Then comes Monday, and we start all over. Eventually, I went from, I love this job, to, I don't give a f***. And I wasn't the only one. Our performance dropped, and we started missing deadlines. Did the owner account for it in the contracts? No! Repetition makes perfection. This time you can do it faster, was his reasoning, and he just kept signing more and more contracts, and dumping them onto us. I remember this one meeting when he came in and asked us about the status of Project D, as the deadline was next week. Well, we hadn't even started working on this, as we had our hands full with Project C, which started later because we didn't finish Projects A and B in time. This is how far it went. Deposits from new contracts were used to pay fines for old contracts. At this meeting, I realized that I've had enough. Of course, our job was not only franchising. We had our own games that needed to be maintained, and we were doing that all the time alongside that franchising hell. What was the biggest issue with all the games was the control software. It was a crap ton of simple-purposed scripts driving all the Raspberry Pis and Arduinos in the game, but it had one UI presented to the Game Master so he could control all the props in the game, override them, etc. Well, at least in theory. But oh boy, was it buggy like hell. Sometimes not even working at all. Sometimes you'd want to shine a light on an object to give players a hint, but instead it opened doors to the next level. It was no universal, simple requests required massive changes, lots of overrides were not implemented correctly. One day, the owner finally agreed to my demands and allowed me to rewrite all of it. It took me a few months, but I created a universal engine that could handle all of the shit game designers were asking us to do. It was easy to expand, had error protection, and recovery tasks. Now, if one prop stopped responding, you just opened the debug page and clicked restart. That was a game changer, as previously the Game Master had to switch off the power, and sometimes that wasn't possible during the game. My biggest achievement, I created easy scripting language which was used to describe the game workflow. The Game Master now had a shitload of working controls and an option to interrupt the predefined tasks and change the flow. But that barely happened, as the game was now almost automatic, and he was just there to give hints. I was not comfortable running this software on the Raspberry Pi that was there for the previous control, and I wanted better hardware for that. My request was always denied by the owner, but the game's manager wanted the new software working ASAP. To this point, we were always just testing it from my laptop, so I decided to lend them a few PCs. Some time ago, my friend from a big corporate pulled a crap ton of Dell Optiplex workstations from an e-scrap. They were working fine, had Intel i5 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, decent onboard graphics, a DisplayPort, USB 3.0, fully working computer. You could buy them refurbished for just about $200. Side note for people who don't know computers, I'm not reading anymore, this is Ryan. That is good. I'm going to leave it at that. That is good. The company just had no use for them, and no one wanted to go over selling them, so they dumped them. I had a stack of 20 of them at home just collecting dust. I took a few of them to my work, and the boss agreed that we will settle this later, so I just emailed him a list of all of my HW that was used in the games. 5 PCs, some Wi-Fi routers, old tables, some monitors, and other stuff I had collected, mostly from e-waste, fixed it, and had no use for. Of course, I did not tell them I got it for free and was expecting them to pay me for it. Fast forward, I'm fed up with the franchising deadlines and got a few job offers that made me realize my real price and that I was abused as a young kid in his 20s working for almost nothing. But I was waiting. In the next month, my software was deployed in the remaining games. Tech Moron was out of the picture for a few months now. Tech Senior had some programming knowledge and was able to use my scripting language, but had very little understanding about the insides of the complex engines I wrote, which was now being developed for over a year. I had results, I was important, and I had demands. I scheduled a meeting with the owner where I wanted to present the list of all the wrong things that I wanted to do something about. It all came to one single argument. I'm not happy here, but you need me, so you'll fix these issues and give me a raise, or I'm leaving. And I will stand my ground. A recruiter from a big IT company I wanted to work for messaged me on LinkedIn a few weeks prior, and I had already went on the interview, so I had an escape plan prepared, and the future looked bright, and I was ready to make it happen. The day of the meeting comes up, and I'm in a good mood until there was a nasty accident in the workshop. I won't post any details, as this would identify me in a second, but this even is important. I, being the youngest one here, not even responsible for the mess, was tasked with cleaning it up. I had an argument with the workshop manager about me being a programmer and not a radioactive waste cleaning lady, but in the end, I just broke and started cleaning. Halfway through it, almost vomiting from the smell, I just snapped. None of this would happen in a decent IT company. I went to my office, packed my stuff, and just sat there playing games, waiting for the owner. When he showed up, I told him all of the issues. He argued with some, but when we got to the end, I just told him that today was the final straw and that I'm leaving right now. I was employed as an independent contractor, so they could save some money on taxes, and my contract had nothing about my time there. I just told him I'll send him the download link for all the files I have, as the contract stated that they're owned by the company. He begged me to stay for one more month as they were behind on many deadlines, but I said I would think about it and then left. On my way home, I called the recruiter and told him I accept the job and can start next month. The next day, I made a big archive of about 150 gigabytes of files, backups, etc. that I had, uploaded it to my server, and emailed the link to the owner and Tech Senior. I then spent the next 2 weeks in bed watching Netflix and ignoring calls. For the last week, I showed up to help clear some things, hand over my projects, ask about the computers and other stuffs I lent to him, which he said he would pay for, and then left. I was lucky as hell. Then, next month, the corona happened, and a month later, they were forced to close all games by government, making their income go almost zero overnight. This, I believe, was the reason they never paid me for my stuff, even though I repeatedly asked until I got tired of it. Time went by until a few weeks ago when I saw the Tech Senior was looking for a new job. I messaged him and we talked. He told me that they survived by doing private events for companies until they could open a month ago. All the other tech guys except him were let go, but he managed. Until he got into an argument with the owner, that is. He didn't tell me much details, but the owner wanted something either impossible or super expensive. When he presented the cheap alternative, the owner snapped and fired him on the spot. He tried to reason with him about not firing him until he can teach his successor and find a new job in the meantime, but he was fired right on the spot. A week later, I get a call from the owner. He hired the younger tech guys he fired during COVID and wanted me to come and answer their questions, mostly about the engine I wrote. I agreed, but as we were planning the meeting, I was suspecting he just wants me to do it for free. When I brought up the hourly rate, he told me we would solve it later, hangs up, and never calls me again. The day of the meeting came. I was waiting in my car outside the workshop, waiting to see if he'll call me and see where I am, but he does not. A few days later, I parked next to the warehouse where all the games were held, with a Yagi antenna in my car. Surprise, surprise, the Wi-Fi routers I lent him were still there, and the password unchanged. I connected to the Wi-Fi and poked around in the network. All the PCs that I lent to him had run the software were all still there, still running the Linux server I installed there, and looking at the logs, they were still used to control the games. I wrote a script that runs on boot, rolls a dice, and then deletes the whole drive. I was connected to my Wi-Fi router, making changes to my computer, formatting my drives. Then I drove away. A few days ago, I got a call. Apparently, when the Monday shift came in, the control system for one of the games was not responding. The browser was showing a timeout. They decided to reset power for the whole rack where all the PCs were multiple times, hoping it would start up because turning it off and on again has always worked. When they decided to stop trying, they find out that all 8 games were dead. The quote-unquote new old tech guys figured out what the drives probably died of, but had no knowledge about my system, so they couldn't set it up. When I asked about their tech senior, the owner made some excuse about him quitting and not wanting to work for them anymore. I told him I was happy to help, and in the end, this used to be my dream job. But I now work for a big company, and I don't have much time, and it's expensive. I can come over to set it up, but my hourly rate is now $150. He talked me down to $100, which was still about twice as much as I make currently. When I arrived, I checked the PCs, pulled out the email I sent him a year ago, and told him that these serial numbers match these on the labels. I told him I'm happy to find my lost stuff, grabbed the first PC, and took it to my car. We had an argument. I told him I'm either taking all the stuff, or he's paying me something over $2,400. He wanted to call the police, but I had proof that this equipment was mine. He eventually agreed, and I got to work. All my software was still in the bit bucket, even with the few modifications tech seniors managed to make, alongside all of the config files and scripts with the game workflow that tech senior was periodically modifying and backing up, so it was a pretty easy job to say the least. I got it all working and then stayed for a few more hours explaining some stuff to the tech guys. I printed the invoice and left, tired but satisfied. Yesterday, a nice sum of about $3,600 landed in my bank account. From what they told me, all 8 games were dead for 3 days. Each game costs about $80 to $120, takes 1 hour to finish, and half an hour is needed for preparation. So there are just 12 slots every day, averaging on $9,600 income per day. When fully booked, this of course is just the income profit after paying all the rent, wages, electricity, consumables used in games, etc., is much lower, however I don't necessarily know how much. Before the shutdown, about 80% of those slots were booked during the week, and 100% of those slots were booked during weekends. I'd just like to think I made him lose $23,000, not counting the angry customers which were forced to reschedule, just because he was a jerk. If he paid me for my stuff or didn't fire his only tech guy, none of this would have happened. TLDR, my boss was a jerk, made us work insane overtime, and didn't pay me for equipment I agreed to sell to him. Then fired everybody who knew how his business was running. I then decided to take over my equipment he stole, halting his business and costing him thousands. And there you have it, folks. The end of the IT revenge. If you like that story, be sure to like this video, as well as subscribe and stick around with notifications turned on so you can stay up to date with all the latest and greatest here on the channel. As always, my name's Ryan, the voice behind Reddit Voice, the official host here on the channel, uploading just about every single day, and I look forward to seeing you guys in tomorrow's video.